folks, I'm Jen and I'm here with my friend Derek today. We decided it was a beautiful day to take a walk in beautiful Ojibway Park. We try to get out here as much as possible to enjoy nature, and it's nice when on every occasion we can kind of experience something new or learn something new. So hopefully we can teach you guys a few things today. We decided to focus on the trees because Derek is one of our resident tree guys, and he's going to focus specifically on two families of trees today, the oak family and the maple family. There are multiple species in each family, so we're going to take a closer look at them on this beautiful fall day. Lots of changes are happening in nature and changes all around us. The populations of animals are changing as things are getting ready to hibernate or migrate, and the trees are changing too. So he's going to show us some of the different characteristics we can use to identify oaks and maples this time of year. And then I'll talk a bit about their role in nature and how important they are and why it's so important to protect and preserve them. So it's a beautiful day. Let's see what we can find.
So we're standing at a black oak tree right now. This is one of the many species of oaks that we have here in Essex County. This one's fairly unique though. So this tree specifically likes very dry, sandy sites with well-drained soil. And I've pulled a couple examples of the leaf here so you can see. So these leaves come to have very pointed lobes. So that means it's in the red oak family. So usually the best way to start to ID an oak tree is to figure out right off the bat if it's in the white oak family or the red oak family. If it looks like this with the pointed lobes, that means it's in the red oak family. So this black oak is part of the red oak family. Now this leaf in particular looks very similar to, say, a red oak, but the way you can tell them apart is a black oak leaf will be very shiny and dark green on the front. This one doesn't look that way because it's the fall, so it's a little bit old, but usually when they're fresh and they're mature, very shiny, dark green on the front and a lot lighter on the back. So it'll be a little bit more yellow on the back and they won't have that kind of nice sheen that the front of the leaf will have. Also, usually these trees have very are shallowly notched, which means the lobes aren't extremely pronounced, and the leaf notches, which are kind of right in between each lobe of the leaf, are fairly shallow. Now leaves can be highly variable on trees, so usually it will look something similar to this, but it can also look a little bit like this, where you see these notches in between the lobes can be very deep and pronounced, which makes the lobes very pronounced as well. So the bark on this black oak tree is light gray with vertical ridges. When these trees are younger, the bark will appear a lot smoother, but as they mature, you'll see these vertical ridges start to form on the tree, and they're almost separated into these blocky segments. So if you were to come up close to these trees, you can see they're kind of separated into segments. When you look at it from far, you can't really notice that, but it's just a detail when you get closer that you will notice. Also, this time of year, they're dropping their acorns. So the acorns of the black oak are just almost just like your classic acorn shape with a lightly colored large cap that comes about halfway down the acorn. Also, when these are fresh and they fall off the tree, they kind of have this like hairy film on them that slowly comes off as they mature. So here we're standing at a nice white oak tree. So this tree is very easy to identify, especially this time of the year when the leaves are still on it. So the leaves on this tree are very unique. So this tree is part of the white oak family. You can easily tell that because the lobes come to a rounded point. So they don't come to a sharp point like an oak tree in the red oak family would. And also, the leaf notches are very deep. So the leaf lobes are very pronounced and easy to see. And like I said, they come to this nice round point. So it's a very unique leaf. Here's actually a better example of one right here. So you can see how distinct that leaf is there. This time of the year, they're also dropping their acorns, which, like the leaves, are actually very unique looking. So their acorns are a nice dark brown color, and I'll throw some better close-up shots of this acorn in after I'm done talking, but you'll be able to see that The acorn cap is actually very scaly, bumpy, and almost looks like a bunch of warts on top of the actual acorn nut itself. So it is very distinct looking. Now, unfortunately, this time of year, the acorn crop for white oaks in our county is very slim. Just like other fruit-bearing trees, they kind of go through a cycle of producing really well, then it kind of drops off, then another year they'll produce a lot. This year is kind of one of those off years where they're really not producing a whole lot, so you probably won't see too many of these around, but we've managed to find a couple here in the Ojibway Prairie complex that are still producing this year. So the bark on this tree is really light gray, and as the tree matures, the bark will actually start to look a little bit shaggy. The bark will start to lift up in kind of long segments, which kind of gives it that shaggy look.
All of the species in the oak family host a huge diversity of vertebrate and invertebrate species. If you look up into its branches, you might see owls roosting up there, you might see songbirds or woodpeckers nesting, you might find mammals like raccoons sleeping up among the branches. It provides lots of food and shelter for these animals. It also hosts lots of Lepidoptera species, more than any other genus. Those are the caterpillars of moths and butterflies. They like to feed on the leaves of the oak tree species. And all of these insects in turn provide food for the birds and other animals. So it's a critically important part of our healthy forest. And this time of year, all the oaks are producing acorns. And these acorns are a really important food source for deer, chipmunks, squirrels, raccoons, turkeys. All the animals love to eat the acorns that don't grow into a new oak tree. So they're really an important part and a great tree to plant if you're looking to bring diversity and wildlife into your neighborhood.
So here we're standing beside a pin oak tree. So this oak tree is one of the most unique oak trees we have in the county, particularly because it has a really unique growth pattern that I'm going to show you in a second. Also, its leaves are very easy to identify just because how large these leaf notches are and how skinny the lobes of this leaf is. So as you can see, it's very distinct looking, very unique looking compared to some of the other oak trees. And it is part of the red oak family because they all come to a nice sharp point on the edge of each lobe compared to the white oaks that have the blunted tip. So the growth pattern of this tree is really interesting. So what happens as the tree starts to get more mature and its crown starts to fill out, it actually just lets all the lower branches die off, which makes the tree look actually really messy and kind of scraggly looking, but it also makes it really easy to identify. As you're walking through the forest and you see a large oak tree with a lot of lower branches that are all dead, just kind of hanging off the tree, that's the pin oak here. And you can kind of see it behind me here, all these dead branches that are covered in grapevines. These are all some of those lower branches that I just let die, and now it just kind of keeps the canopy going. And it's interesting because it's actually a very efficient way for this tree to grow. It doesn't use up any excess energy pumping starches or sugars out to any of those lower branches. It just lets them die and just focuses all of its energy on its main canopy. Now the bark on this tree is also unique compared to some of the other oak trees. The ridges, when this tree gets mature, is really shallow, and you can almost see these little squiggly lines kind of in between the ridges when you get close to this tree, which is also just a unique identification characteristic to look at when looking at a tree like this. So I quickly want to touch on this tree here that I'm standing next to. So this is a Freeman's maple. It's a tree that not a lot of people even know that we have around. It's actually a hybrid between the red maple and the silver maple. So what you get when they hybridize, when they grow in the same area, is you get these Freeman's maples growing. So this tree is very hard to identify in the wintertime when it doesn't have leaves. It just looks like a normal red maple in the wintertime. So in the summertime is when you can really tell if it's a straight red or a hybrid between red and silver, the Freeman's maple. So we want to look at the leaves to identify this one. So here's an example of the leaves. It basically looks like a red maple leaf that has 5 leaf lobes. And this tree consistently has 5 distinct lobes, whereas the red maple usually only has 3. It is a little bit variable, so you can see some red maple trees and leaves on it that have 5 lobes, but this will consistently have 5. So if you see a tree that looks like a red maple, but all the leaves all are 5 lobed, it's most likely the hybrid Freeman's maple here. Also, the leaf notches are slightly deeper than what you would see on a red maple. So there's just a couple slight differences that you can see in the leaves of those two trees that let you know that this is actually a hybrid Freeman's maple. Also, this tree likes to grow on a lot of different soil conditions. So whereas the silver likes really wet sites and the red also likes some wet sites, this prefers wet as well. However, it can survive and grow on all soil conditions, so you may see it in different sites.
We'll talk about maples for a second, and I wanted to teach you guys an acronym that you might have heard before. It's MAD horse. Now, every letter in MAD stands for a tree that has opposite arrangement. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. But the trees are maple, ash, dogwood, MAD, and horse chestnut. These four tree species have branches in an opposite arrangement. So when you look at a branch, the leaves branch off on the opposite side of the branch. All of the other trees will have an alternate arrangement, which means along the branch, they branch off alternately. So that's a quick way to try and get you on the right track to identifying your trees. And I wanted to talk a bit about maples before we move on, because maples are really important to the ecosystem and to our Canadian heritage and our culture. When we think of maple trees, a lot of people think of maple syrup. If you tap a maple tree, you can extract some sap and you can boil that down to produce maple syrup. So think of how much maple flavoring we can enjoy in the world. It's all thanks to the maple tree, the humble maple tree. You can make syrup out of other hardwood tree species, but the maple makes the best syrup, and that's because it has a high content of sugar and nutrients in its sap. So what you would want to do is find a tree that's large enough. You would never want to tap a young tree because you might harm it. You want to drill a tap just a little bit into the sapwood. You don't want to penetrate the heartwood and harm the tree. And if you do that during the right time of year, the right time of year being early spring, when the temperatures are below freezing at night and above freezing during the day, the sap is flowing. And when the sap is flowing, you can extract some and boil it down to concentrate those sugars and nutrients and minerals in order to produce that delicious maple syrup or maple sugar. So early settlers have been doing this for hundreds of years. They learned it from the First Nations people, and we still do it today, the old-fashioned way, though on a much larger scale commercially. But we can thank maple trees for maple syrup. Another thing I really love about maple trees is the amazing fall color that they produce. Fall is my favorite season, and one of the reasons is because of the beautiful colors of the deciduous trees. And we have mostly the maples and the oaks to thank. So the sugar maples will change to golden, yellow, and orange colors. The red maple will change to maybe yellow and orange, but also even shades of red and purple. Really beautiful. So it's a nice time of year to take a walk in nature and enjoy the color, or take a drive and see what you can enjoy. Also, they're really important in the ecosystem. They don't host quite as many species as the oak trees, but they host hundreds of species of Lepidoptera, and many insects and animals feed on or roost in their branches and on their leaves.
So here we have a swamp white oak. So this is what the leaf of a swamp white oak looks like. So a swamp white oak has very rounded, shallow lobes with almost no leaf notches. So it is a very distinct looking leaf, especially compared to some of the other oak trees, and especially just the plain white oak that we saw already in this video. It stands out quite a bit, a lot different. And the main thing is it just doesn't have those really deep leaf notches. Here's another example of it, just a smaller one. So the size of this leaf can be variable. Sometimes these leaves are really big, sometimes they're small like this, just kind of similar to a lot of the other tree species. The leaf shapes can be slightly variable. So they're not all going to look the same, but they should all look fairly similar to this. Just like the other oak trees, they're dropping their acorns this time of year. So here we have a swamp white oak acorn. So this acorn is a large acorn, has a fairly large cap on top of it, and the cap looks really rough, and it has almost these small little hairs pointing out all over it. It kind of almost looks like it has a crazy, really messy hairdo on top of it. So it is a very distinct acorn. Again, very large, and has these spiky looking hairs almost on the cap. So the habitat that you're going to find these swamp white oaks in, hence the name swamp white oak, is very moist, rich soils, close to seasonally flooded areas, and wetlands. So right behind me is a bur oak. It's another one of the oak trees we have here in Essex County. And this is what the leaves look like. So it's got a very unique looking leaf. So as you can see here, all the lobes are rounded, which means it's part of the white oak family. So this leaf can be highly variable, but this is usually what the leaf should look like. It's very wide at the top and kind of gets slimmer towards the base with these really deep leaf notches closer to the bottom of the leaf. And like I said, since it's in the white oak family, it has all the rounded lobes. Here's another example. It's a little bit smaller than this one. Like I said, they can be a little bit variable. So a lot of people get the bur oak and the swamp white oak mixed up a lot when they're looking at the leaves specifically. The important thing to note is that the swamp white oak has a more uniformly shaped leaf compared to the bur oak that gets really slim towards the base and has those really deep leaf notches. The swamp white oak doesn't have those deep leaf notches, and it stays just as wide at the top as it is the base. So like I said, it's just more uniformly shaped. There's just less variation in it. Just like the other acorn, it's a very, very unique acorn, which makes this tree very easy. Because this time of year, when you find an acorn like this on the ground, right away you know that it's going to be dropped by a bur oak. You can see how far the cap covers the actual acorn. So the cap actually basically completely covers the acorn, and it has all these shaggy hairs towards the bottom. It looks like someone with like a really shaggy hairdo. It's very easy to identify. The bark on this tree is very similar to the other white oaks, where as it matures it gets these long vertical ridges that actually kind of look like they're peeling up from the tree. So the bark can look a little bit shaggy as well when this tree gets mature. So this next tree that I'm standing by is a red maple. So it's one of Ontario's most common maple trees that we'll see around. It has that classic maple leaf shaped leaf. Now this leaf is really easy to identify because all the lobes are sharply pointed, and it has usually 3 lobes on the leaf. So you can see here 1, 2, 3. Sometimes it'll have 5, so there is a slight variation. Sometimes they'll have 2 more lobes that come off the bottom, similar to other species like sugar maple or Freeman's maple or something like that, or silver maple. But usually it has just the 3. So this type of leaf shape is what you'll most commonly see. Now this tree prefers moist soils or moist sites, so you'll often find it in seasonally flooded areas, near ponds or swamps. That's its most preferred habitat. However, sometimes you'll also see it in a variety of other soils. So it is capable of growing in other places besides wet sites, but it does prefer more moist, rich, wet soils. So the bark on these red maple trees is really smooth when the tree is young. Then as it starts to get more mature, it forms these long vertical scaly ridges. It has a really unique look to it. It almost looks like some of the bark might be peeling off the tree when it's really mature. And hence the name red maple. It gets a beautiful, bright, vibrant red color in the fall.
Thanks so much to everyone for watching. Thanks for joining us on a hike on this beautiful day as fall is just beginning. We'd like to thank Derek for sharing some of his tree knowledge with us, and to Jess for joining us. It's been a beautiful day. We're going to get out there as much as we can, and hopefully you do too.
We're all members of the Essex County Field Naturalist Club, so if you like what you saw today, be sure to follow us on Facebook and our YouTube channel, the Essex County Naturalist Club or Essex County Nature, and consider becoming a member. We'll be getting back into doing some walks again in the future, or just follow our online activities, post activities on our website, and other ways of staying connected with nature in Essex County.
Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned some more interesting things about trees and how to identify them, specifically the oaks and maples that we showed you today. Don't forget to get out this fall and enjoy all the fall colors. In a couple of weeks, all these trees will be nice and colored. It should be really, really nice. So get out there and enjoy nature this fall. Thank you.